Welcome to the Histories of Northamptonshire podcast series, and this episode number 20. Recorded on location, each episode tells the story of one of the many and varied objects which are the focus of the exhibition A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects. The exhibition runs at the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery between the 20th of September 2025 and February 2026. Selected by local individuals, heritage groups and the museum's own curators, each object tells a different story from the county's past. And so, to our guest for this episode.
I'm Dr. Philippa Walton. I'm a lecturer in Roman archaeology at the University of Leicester.
Philippa, welcome to the podcast series. What is the object that we are particularly interested in right now?
Well, what I've got in front of me is a lovely gold stater of the Iron Age ruler Cunobelin.
What does that mean? What is a stater?
It's a gold coin that was minted in the 1st century AD by this Iron Age ruler Cunobelin, and he was the ruler of an area that covered Hertfordshire, Essex and into Northamptonshire in that period.
You say he was a ruler, but where did Cunobelin come from? I've never heard of him.
We only really know about him from his coinage and from Roman sources. The Roman sources describe him as Rex Britannorum, the king of the Britons, but we think that is a bit of an exaggeration, and actually he was only a ruler of a particular smaller area, Northamptonshire, Essex and Hertfordshire in the period. On his coins, he refers to himself as a king.
So how did he become ruler? Was this a title conferred upon him? Was it the result of battles? Was he a warlord or what?
We have no idea how kings and tribal leaders were elected in the Iron Age, but I suspect it was through violence and persuasion rather than a democratic process.
Was Cunobelin actually from Britain, or was he actually from Italy? Was he a Roman?
No, he's definitely an Iron Age leader, an indigenous Briton living in the area in the 1st century AD. He's not a Roman whatsoever. However, his coinage and what the Romans tell us about him suggests that he had strong links with the continent, even before the Roman conquest in AD 43.
So what would the relationship have been between him and the Romans? Is this an era of diplomacy then?
So he was probably seen as a client king by the Roman authorities, so a ruler of a friendly kingdom who wasn't actually controlled by Rome, but probably gave Rome little bribes, was clearly friendly to Roman power. Strangely, after his death around AD 40, his tribe weren't on such good terms with the Romans, and his sons Caraticus and Togodumnus actually led the resistance to Rome in that period. And that culminated in the Boudiccan revolt not long after the Roman conquest.
Tell me about the coin itself. What does it represent? You called it a stater. What would this coin have represented, and who would have used coinage like that?
So it's made out of gold, and in the Iron Age you did have gold coins, silver coins and copper alloy coins, but we have to get away from thinking about them as a medium for exchange, for buying and selling things. They were much more about elite self-representation, so showing off who you were as the leader to your people, and they were probably more likely used in gift exchange or to pay tribute or to sort of cement relationships with your followers than for buying and selling chickens.
It wasn't a medium of trade then. It was a statement of your worth depending on how many of these coins you have and in whatever denomination.
Yeah, and also telling everyone who you are. So Cunobelin puts on his coins the letters Cuno for Cunobelin, and the mint, Camu for Camulodunum, which is modern-day Colchester. And they're telling his followers who he is, that he's the ruler, he's in charge. And that's really emphasised by the images that are on the coins. So on one side, the obverse, or the head side of the coin, we've got a sheaf of corn. And that represents agricultural stability, the ability to feed your people, that you've got the gods on your side, that fertility is always there and you're going to have a sort of kingdom of abundance. And then on the other side, you've got a horse. And the horse in the Iron Age was a really expensive item. It's not purely utilitarian, so it's a symbol of elite power and warrior power too.
So in the same way as we have a monarch's face on our coinage now, this is almost a calling card of Cunobelin himself.
Yes, it's really representing his self-image, how he wants to show himself to his people, to particularly those warriors he wants to keep on side. So that sheaf of corn representing prosperity, the horse representing elite warrior culture, they're both there to show that he's a really good Iron Age ruler. But he does use Latin script too on his coins, and Latin wasn't a thing in the Iron Age. So he's clearly also trying to appeal to ideas of Roman authority too. So he's suggesting he's aware of the wider world in that period.
Now, is that for the benefit of the Britons under his rule, or is that for the benefit of Rome watching him acting as the ruler of the Britons?
I think it's going to be a little bit of both. He's showing that he's a cultured individual, that he knows what's happening on the continent. He's appealing to Roman ideas of authority. So maybe when Romans see his coin, they think, I understand that. I understand that he's trying to say he's a benevolent ruler, that he's in charge, that he's the king.
Who would have had these coins and under what circumstances?
So they probably only circulated amongst the warrior elite and were probably given directly by Cunobelin to his followers. Then they might have spread out a little bit from there. But in archaeological contexts, we only tend to find them at elite sites, really, really central places in the Iron Age. We also find them in hoards and in watery places. So they were clearly had religious significance too. They were made as offerings to the gods, so they had a ritual element in their use as well.
Elsewhere within the exhibition, we understand that there is the minting of coins going on in Northamptonshire. This coin doesn't come from Northamptonshire, it came into Northamptonshire.
Yes, so it was minted in Camulodunum, which is modern-day Colchester in Essex. And we know that because on the coin, on the obverse, that head side, it says Camu, which is an abbreviation of Camulodunum. And Camulodunum was a tribal centre that was taken over by Cunobelin from the Trinovantes. He was actually a member of the tribe of the Cunobelinus, but as his rule progressed, he sort of spread his territory and took over other tribal areas too. So this coin has come a relatively long way from Colchester to end up in the ground in Northamptonshire.
I understand that the River Nen plays a part in that tribalism from a borders perspective. Borders
between different Iron Age territories were quite fluid, but it seems that the Nen might have acted as a border between the territory of the Cunobelinus, so the kingdom of Cunobelin, and the Corioltalvi, which were the tribe based in Leicestershire.
What was the ultimate end of Cunobelin? Because I believe Shakespeare wrote about him or included him in some of his work.
Yes, so the play Cymbeline is very loosely based on the exploits of Cunobelin, but it's very much a fantasy about the ancient past rather than based on any reality. And that's really because we don't actually know that much about Cunobelin, the individual, except from his coins and from Roman historians, who weren't always that friendly to him.
Philippa, do many of these coins exist still? Have many been found? And for that matter, is it likely that this was just simply lost out of someone's pocket or fell out of a bag or something?
Reasonable numbers of coins of Cunobelin have been found, quite often by metal detectorists, and they've been reported to the Portable Antiquities Scheme, which is a national initiative that records objects found by the members of the public. So we have these things turning up as single finds, but also in quite large hoards. And as I said before, they're quite often found in watery places. And in the Iron Age, there was a very direct relationship between talking to the gods and throwing things in water. So if you wanted to make an offering to the gods, water would be the place to do it because you could communicate with them there very easily.
Do you have a reaction to this particular object? Does it say something to you as a person?
I love coins, particularly ancient coins, because they're this direct link with the past, which is not sort of sullied by historical sources. They're a primary source that you can get to know people through if you know what to look for. So I see this as both a historical document but also an archaeological object that gives you a real insight into what Cunobelin stood for in the Iron Age. And that's what I really love about coins.
He certainly sounds as though he was quite the character. He's achieved a certain degree of immortality, number one, because his brand, if you like, is on the coin, which is in our exhibition. But equally, you've got people like Shakespeare writing about him. He was clearly a diplomat as well as a ruler. Why should this item be in the exhibition? What does it say about Northamptonshire?
So it tells us obviously something about the extent of the rule of Cunobelin. We're right on the edges of his territory here in Northamptonshire, but this coin shows that in some way he's reaching out slightly beyond his territory into that territory of the Coriol Tavy, and perhaps that shows his desire for territorial gain, even just through one single coin.
Fascinating. The picture you have painted is just astonishing in terms of the coin unlocking the story of the man, and the man who in turn shaped the country that we now perhaps take for granted as Great Britain, or at least England, and right here in Northamptonshire. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast series.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to this Histories of Northamptonshire podcast. If you would like to find out more about the objects or listen to other episodes in the series, go to www.northamptonmuseums.com. Alternatively, you can visit the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery, where you can see the A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects exhibition for yourself. The Histories of Northamptonshire project is funded by Arts Council England as part of the National Portfolio Programme.